I myself was once a gay. Now I'm an ex-gay, Megan. I work for a place called True Directions, who help people like yourself learn to understand the reasons behind homosexual tendencies and how to heal them.
What is the nature of sexual orientation? Why are we sexually attracted to someone of the same or opposite sex? This topic has been puzzling sociological and psychological scientists for decades.
Sexual orientation, first of all, I don't care for the word orientation because we are what we are and we ain't what we ain't, and usually we're a mix, from research that was done many years ago regarding gender, if you will.
I don't think we have good information about that. A lot of research has been done. The question of, is it mainly genetic, is it mainly biology, or is it, the nature or nurture thing is not resolved. We don't have enough information to say one way or the other. So the people who advocate that we're born with our sexual orientation determined can't say that unequivocally.
Our orientation, if you will, to me, is how we've been taught to believe and perceive ourselves and others, in terms of what orientation we have. But genetically, naturally speaking, we are what we are, regardless of how we see ourselves or others.
I believe there's a strong genetic component. But as I say, there's not enough research at this point. I think the other view, like the ex-gay movement, is based on religion, not science.
In 1952, the American Psychiatric Association's first publication of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders listed homosexuality as a mental disorder, grouping it with borderline personality disorder or schizophrenia.
One of the most telling things is that Dr. Robert Spitzer, who was instrumental in getting homosexuality removed from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the Psychiatric Association, the DSM.
I came up with a definition in 1973 that made it possible to argue that homosexuality was not a mental disorder.
It was not removed mostly because he recognized that it was not a disease or a disorder. It was removed mostly because he listened to gay activists at the time who said, we don't have a disorder.
The mass dissemination of this understanding of homosexuality perpetuated a stigma that would last for decades and aided in confusing the masses of homosexuality's true nature. This controversial classification was met under critical scrutiny by research done by the National Institute of Mental Health. This research concluded that there was no empirical or scientific basis for this classification and that homosexuality is a natural and healthy sexual orientation.
Not only is the APA changing now, but APA changed before 1973. We have to understand, if we're going to follow the words of the APA, then we have to consider that before 1973, homosexuality was always a disorder. Always a disorder. The three greats in psychology, Jung, Freud, and Adler, the three greats, all saw homosexuality as a disorder. And it has been consistently seen as a disorder until one day in 1973. What happened on that day? Was there a big scientific meeting? Was there an understanding of new evidence? No, there was no new evidence presented. Suddenly it was a political decision. And so in one day, 150 years of literature was wiped away.
In 1973, the American Psychiatric Association removed this classification from the DSM and stated that homosexuality per se implies no impairment in judgment, stability, reliability, or general social or vocational capabilities.
the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Psychoanalytic Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the National Association of Social Workers have all stated that homosexuality should not be treated as a mental disorder, and that they oppose attempts at reparative or conversion therapy, and that sexual orientation is not a choice and cannot be changed.
When a person wants to change their sexual orientation, if they're unhappy with being gay, it's because of all the social forces. It's not about sexual orientation. There's nothing inherent in being gay that is unpleasant or that would make a person not want to be gay. I believe that the people who can't handle it are the ones who succumb to the pressure of society, because society is so ugly and hateful toward people who are gay.
Depends on the depth, the pressures that they've been under, their own sense of how they've been taught to see themselves. If they think they're terrible, they're sinful, they're going to hell, for example, and they've been told this repeatedly, and they believe it, okay. The emotional distress is tremendous, especially when, even though they try to be straight or whatever, they can't, and they find themselves slipping, that kind of thing. Then they think they're damned or whatever, and many people become depressed, clinically speaking. They have suicidal ideation, they commit suicide. We've seen in the national media many situations over time where individuals have killed themselves, especially in high school levels and junior high levels, have killed themselves because of not being able to overcome it, fitting in and seeing themselves as being the one that's at fault. Something's wrong with them. And so they see no cure or no way out other than to do themselves in.
Ryan came to me when he was 16 and he said he was gay. He said he did not want to change, that he did not want to live right by the Lord. And I told him to leave my house because I was not going to have that under my roof. And 5 months later, he was gone. The day I told him to leave was the last time I saw my son. Now, I know I can never, ever bring him back, but if I can help one child from this misery, I will do all in my power to accomplish that.
They know they're going to be mistreated by family, by friends, by employers, by politicians, by laws, by, the societal pressure is enormous. And I think we can readily identify that that's where the impulse comes from to change. And the people who want to change that orientation are taking advantage of a person's situation.
There are many different organizations and many different methods of what is called conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is psychotherapy aimed at eliminating homosexual desires and is used by people who do not think homosexuality is one variation within human sexual orientation, but rather still believe homosexuality is a mental disorder.
It's about love, discipline, and the holy word of God here and in the world. Now, John, you had a chance to meet the residents?
Some.
Did you like them? Were they friendly?
Yeah.
Or do you think you'd like it here?
He's very shy, and this would be the first time he'd be away from home.
I think you'd like it here, darling, wouldn't you?
Mrs. Tillett, I think what you and your husband have created is a miraculous thing, but this is only the first place we visited, and I'd like some more time to decide if that's okay.
I see.
George, there's nothing wrong with this place. They're all pretty much the same, aren't they?
Well, if you think that, then wait till you see the others. The work we do here is excellent. Not about counter-programming or brainwashing or anything, but the love of Christ.
One of the most common methods is what is called pray the gay away. It is an attempt to use religious intervention to change the way the person thinks. Generally, They believe they can free a person from homosexuality through the power of Jesus Christ.
That is seen as the great salvation. And so there are wonderful, well-meaning people who believe that this is their ministry and that this is something that they should do.
We admit we are powerless over our homosexuality and our lives are unmanageable. We've come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity.
What about those people who started out gay and say they became straight by discovering God? What about ex-gay ministries?
Even so-called ex-gay ministries don't claim to change a person's inner sexual desires, just his or her sexual conduct.
We're still gay. If these places really work, why don't they all use the same technique? Why does each ministry experiment its own way?
Well...
And why have so many members and leaders recanted earlier claims that they were changed?
Maybe these programs don't work for everyone, but what's the harm?
How about the feelings of shame and guilt they instill and reinforce in their victims?
With the development of the ex-gay movement, a movement that consists of religious organizations that seek to get people who are homosexuals or have same-sex attractions to change, Exodus International, one of the more well-known ex-gay organizations, identify change as attaining abstinence from homosexual behaviors, lessening of homosexual temptations, strengthening their sense of masculine or feminine identity, correcting distorted styles of relating with members of the same and opposite gender. With the existence of such organizations as Exodus International, Evergreen International, Focus on the Family, and many others distorts Christian ideals of love and acceptance and find these organizations as homophobic and even bigoted. However, these organizations feel that they are doing the right thing for their clients and care deeply about them.
It's not us that they should be mad at. Get mad at the Word of God. Really, at the end of the day, they're kicking against God. Homosexuality is an abomination. Now, we need to have compassion for people who are bound by that sin. And it is a sin. Call a spade a spade. You're not going to help anybody by sugarcoating the sin. No, you've got to leave them with the weight of the guilt and the shame, even if it makes them hate you temporarily. I've had many people hate me temporarily and get saved a month later and thank me for holding the line. People need to know the Word of God. It's the truth that sets you free.
Dr. Dobson and Focus on the Family have a program they call Love One Out. And they also call it reparative therapy. They say their aim is to prevent or to treat, to change homosexuality.
Homosexuality is a preventable disorder, and I still see it as a disorder.
I have to tell you that as a psychologist, the idea that homosexuality is a preventable disorder is completely misguided. There's no scientific research to back it up. It's not a disorder any more than heterosexuality is a disorder. Dr. Dobson tells parents that if your child tells you he or she is gay or lesbian, then you should not say, well, that's okay, you should not try to accept them, but you should try to get them changed. That is exactly the opposite of what you should do. It's the way to devastate your child. It's not something that can be changed at will because it's inborn, it's natural. And to call it reparative is a misnomer because there's nothing to repair.
While there are religious organizations that perform such services, many overlook the existence of a more secular form of conversion therapy. The National Association for Research and Therapy of Homosexuality, commonly known as NARTH, offers conversion therapy and other regimens that purport to change the sexual orientation of individuals who experience unwanted same-sex attraction.
A number of psychologists and psychiatrists around the country who do this kind of work decided to come together and to support ourselves and to support clients to preserve their right to receive treatment. And that's how NARTH was born in 1992. And in the beginning, they dismissed us, they ignored us. The strategy of the gay activists, the strategy of gay psychiatrists within the American Psychiatric Association was to ignore us. Well, they couldn't ignore us. We kept growing and growing, and we continue to have an influence. We have a very strong and well-written website with excellent scientific information. We're very careful that what we put on our website is scientifically grounded. It's not religious, it's not political. We have a national conference every year, which is very well attended, excellent speakers. We're making inroads. We're making inroads, and we cannot be ignored. And today we have over 1,000 members, so we're doing very, very well.
While most conversion therapy consists of counseling, there are some methods that are considered the most controversial, and in many cases, the most damaging. These methods are most commonly known as aversion therapy.
Aversion therapy is one of those horrible things that the psychiatric community has done that has made it difficult for people to come and ask for help because it's so horrible.
Aversion therapy attempts to modify behaviors to eliminate unwanted thoughts or behaviors. Aversion therapy in relation to homosexuality uses techniques such as physical pain to associate with different imagery.
Of course, this just ends up screwing up a person's mind and body, and it's horrible. It's torture. It is not therapy.
One of the most famous cases of aversion therapy was at Brigham Young University in the 1970s. The university's psychology department experimented with electroshock aversion therapy in an attempt to cure homosexuality.
The last appointment that I went to was the worst. They put electrodes on me, on my wrists, and on a strap on my chest, and on my genitals. I was given a button that I was told to push if I saw something that I felt was sinful and wrong, or if I liked it. At this point, it was only naked men. I was told if I didn't push the button strongly enough that they would push it for me. And I don't recall how long that went on, but I was told to get dressed and leave. I have a friend who has since passed away, who they kept pushing the button on him because he wouldn't do it. He became totally sexually dysfunctional.
This method was unsuccessful.
They had me bring pictures of men, including myself, that I found attractive, and then they put in pictures of women and mixed them up. And they gave me the controls so they wouldn't see themselves as abusers. And they said, when you see an attractive man, you turn up the power. And then we'll change it, and then when you see attractive women, we'll turn down the power. It was just that simplistic.
Sam Brenton, a graduate student at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, shares his story of his experiences with aversion therapy to college campuses across the country.
So it all started back when I was living in Florida. We were a missionary family, Southern Baptist missionaries, living in Sanford, Florida, and a playboy had gotten onto the mission commune. Missionaries tend to live together because of how little we make. And all the other guys started getting interested in it, and I thought myself so holy and righteous that it just didn't affect me anymore. So I went to my parents. I talked to them every day, all day. I was homeschooled for most of my life, so for me, telling them everything seemed absolutely normal. And I looked at my dad and I said, I didn't have those feelings, like all proud and high and mighty. I said, but to be honest, sometimes I have those feelings when I think about Dale. Dale was my best friend at that point. Dale was a male. I remember my dad's face dropping. I remember him turning bright red. I remember him coming toward me, and I remember his arms coming up. And then the next thing I remember is waking up in the emergency room. It's an emergency room for the mission commune, so of course I'd fallen down the stairs. And I would fall down the stairs quite a few more times in the next month. I pretty much started turning into a pile of bruises. I was really, really scared. I didn't understand what was going on because at this point I didn't understand what I was doing wrong. I thought that I was supposed to tell them what was actually going on because they were my parents. They were supposed to protect me. And that wasn't quite how it was turning out. I was getting very, very scared. My mom stepped in and said, okay, this isn't working, let's try therapy. I looked in this well-lit room and I'm like, this is gonna be so much better. I can't wait to start this. And we walked into his back office. I said goodbye to my mom. We walked into his office. I sat down on a couch a little bit bigger than this, and he closed the door and said, Sam, you're the last one left. the government finds gay children and kills them. And somehow you got through. We think it might have been God, we don't know what it was, but if the government finds out what we're doing here, they will kill you. I'm now terrified thinking that, first of all, I've never talked to another gay person because I don't really understand what's going on in my life. So of course I feel alone. And that mental terror is unfathomable. It's a really great way of keeping you in the closet as well. We then moved into my faith. I'm a missionary kid. I talk to God every single day. And the next thing that I'm told is the pray the gay away practice, which is becoming very, very popular. That God hates me, and if I just pray hard enough, maybe I'll be able to change. At this point, my mom says that I was in tears at the dinner table, and laying next to my bed, just sobbing, praying to God not to hate me, to come back, that I promised I would be good if He would just help me change. I couldn't turn it off inside, and I knew that He would be powerful enough to. Then we moved into, this is all forms of mental torture if you ask me, but we moved into the last part of that mental section, which was my health. I was told that I had AIDS, that was why the government killed them as children, was because if they found the gay men were bringing the AIDS population, bringing AIDS into the population. So I was going to die within a few years. I'm now horrified that, one, I'm the only one left. Two, the God that loved me all my entire life hated me. And three, I'm dying of a disease. At this point, I had my first suicide attempt. It wouldn't be the last time, but it's a scary first time.
Aversion therapy is harmful because of the use of physical stimuli to modify the homosexual thoughts and feelings.
I'd be put in a chair not similar to this, it was much harder and not nearly as comfortable. But I'd be put into a chair, bands would be put over my wrists, and then blocks of ice would be put on my hands. And then pictures of men touching other men would be shown to me, so I would associate the cold, not necessarily really painful, but cold pain and separation and not wanting it with touching another man. That was happened for a little bit of time. We still did all the prayers, we still talked about the verses and the government secrets and how I was working on changing. We moved into the next section, which was the similar setup, except for instead of ice being put on my hands, bands of wire were put around my hands. And pretty much, like I like to tell my fellow engineers, it's like an electric coil. All it was that if a picture of a man and a woman were shown to me, nothing would happen. But if a picture of a man were shown to me, just touching again, nothing sexual at this point, just touching, hugging or shaking hands, the bands would be turned on and heated. So it's like, I try to explain to people, it's not like I was being burned, it's like when you touch a pan on the stove. It doesn't necessarily burn you because it's so short, but it still hurts like hell. That was the factor that pretty much has started a lot of my repercussions. So I stopped hugging my dad. I know if a boy or a man would come up to me on the street to like shake my hand or something, because we were still living a normal life, I would move back and run to my mom. We moved into the months of hell next. And months of hell were similarly put into a chair, midriff also secured and legs secured, and needles were stuck into the fingers with wires attached. And if a picture of a sexual encounter between a man and a man were shown to me, I'd be shocked. It's the part of the aversion therapy that I've forgiven my parents a lot about it, but I still don't understand it. How a mom can hear her child screaming in the room next to her and not run in and stop it. Obviously, it didn't quite work. And I would later, when I would go to Kansas State University, I learned that there was such a thing as a gay community. I started Googling because I was so worried that if I even Googled the word gay, that the government would track that.
There have been many cases, such as in Sam's case, where the therapies can still affect their daily lives.
The problem is the repercussions. The aversion therapy has a lot of negative repercussions that last for the rest of my life. So for me, every single time I have to touch another man, I have to prepare myself for the electric shock. I hug people, they don't actually hug me. Even if you try to hug me, I'm actually associating it as I'm hugging you, because I can't imagine how angry I would be at the pain that you're causing me, and so I've decided that I am causing myself pain. Kisses, my very first kiss was excruciatingly painful. I kissed and then ran out of the room and puked, which is not, I felt really bad for the partner, because at that point, no one wants to think that they're that bad of a kisser. And it's this concept that I still feel the shock every single time there's a touch. That's not something that a person wants to have to deal with. We move forward. There's a lot of suicidal tendencies. I have to, whenever I move to an area, know exactly where the hospital is and have my friends on speed dial, and the Trevor Project number is listed all over my apartment, because as soon as I start feeling the feelings, I start calling. The repercussions are horrifying, with the results being non-existent. Doesn't seem like a good program to me. Pretty much looks like torture. My goal is very simple. It is to make any conversion therapy for a person under the age of 18 child abuse.
Through all of the different types of conversion therapy, there has not been one case where someone's sexual orientation has been successfully changed. Perhaps this is because, as the American Psychiatric Association and many other mental health organizations have long recognized that being homosexual poses no inherent obstacle to leading a happy, healthy, and productive life, and that the vast majority of gay and lesbian people function well in the full array of social institutions and interpersonal relationships.
APA, in all its forms, psychoanalytic, psychological, psychiatric, and pediatric, have all come out and said this is wrong, stop doing it, it is damaging people. The problem I have with these organizations is they have not classified it as child abuse, and that's where that line is from. Saying something's bad does not make it illegal.